Hi, it's Norman Kochnick here from Coogee Beach, as in Sydney, Australia. And I've been joined by Chris Vernon, who's from Kent in not so sunny England. Apparently it's raining there. Is that right, Chris?
It is. It's pretty grim today. So it's as you can tell by the hoodie and Norman wearing his t-shirt, that's where the sun is. So
That says it all. So we are in our second episode of an Aussie upon talking about India. The reality is there's a very strong theme of India here at the moment in Australia. Australia are playing India in the fourth test, which will be held at the Gabba in Brisbane. And there's a lot of conjecture as to the teams for that match tomorrow. And then obviously at the same time, we'll be talking about Australia versus India in the fourth test, but we're also going to be talking about the very first test between England and Sri Lanka, which is taking place at Galle in southern Sri Lanka. So that'll be our second topic. And then we'll bring in the third topic, which will come very much into the frame of discussions around Smith, Payne, and aspects around the media that involve those two, which is still lingering around. It hasn't gone away. And then we can finish up talking about the position of India in their cricketing world with injuries. It's probably going to be relevant to the whole discussion, actually. But Chris, let's start with the fourth test between Australia and India, which starts tomorrow, Australian time, which will be more like midnight your time, I'm guessing. I'm not sure what time it is.
I think it's something like 11, 12 o'clock stop. So I might try and sleep the first hour in before bed, but we'll have to see.
So Australia appear to have an advantage over India purely based on the sheer number of injuries that India have got. In fact, India have not named their side for tomorrow because they're still hoping that the likes of Jasprit Bumrah. I don't think Fahari, but Fahari might also be there, and Agarwal. They're all three of them are injured at different degrees of injury. I believe that Bumrah, they're trying desperately to get ready, but if he's anything less than 80, 90%, they won't risk him because they've got an important series coming up against England shortly after in India. So I don't think they're going to be risking him. So the likelihood is that we will have a very depleted bowling lineup of India, with Siraj and Saini being the opening bowlers, and those two weren't even in the frame to play for India a matter of a few weeks ago. And in the batting lineup, well, they've got a very stable top four, but they've got the likes of Punt right up the order now, and Saha probably will come in to keep. Agarwal's injury will depend on whether he plays. If he doesn't play, they may go with more bowlers. It's a very interesting combination of decisions they've got to make, and they're going to make them overnight. We had Vikram Rathore, who's actually the batting coach, was on a BCCI press conference earlier today, and he was very diplomatic with his answers. He was making sure that effectively he wasn't going to let on who was in and who was out of the side. And from your perspective, you've been watching England versus Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I set my alarm this morning, and it was 4:30 start, so I wouldn't say I was particularly coherent at 4:30 this morning, but I put it on and had it I had it on the radio, sort of on the background, and what a good start. I mean, England, I don't think bowled particularly well, but I think Sri Lanka were fairly generous with their wickets by the looks of it. There was an interesting stat, I think, on Test Match Special, and it's impossible to see whether or not it's unique, but it certainly sounds like it could be unique, that every Sri Lankan wicket was out playing an attacking or an aggressive shot, which, when you sit and think about it initially, doesn't sound particularly unique, but no defensive shot or no, just nick off behind playing a forward defensive. It must be fairly unique. I can't believe it's happened too many times. Maybe one of the guys watching later on might be able to try and help us out, justify that. But I saw a couple of wickets that Dom Best took. I mean, Test Match 5 fantastic for him, but there were a couple of fairly ropey deliveries in there that certainly were a gift to him. So
maybe the statistics will tell a lie. In other words, meaning there was probably more behind the 5 than we know. All right, let's return and talk about specifically the game tomorrow. And the Australian side has been, you could argue, a little bit rocked, because Will Pucovski is now not playing. He's damaged his shoulder, and he is out. And Marcus Harris, who has scored a double century or two this season already in the domestic competition that are both actually he's going to join Dave Warner as the opening pair. The difference this time will be that we'll have two left-hand opening batsmen. We've been very much into lately talking about, well, not talking about, but Australia's had a policy of having a left and right-hand batter for quite some time. They had Joe Burns in for a while with Warner, and even when they mixed around, they had Wade with with Burns. And I thought they might go back to that again, which they have with Koski. But it looks as though they may have to, for the first time for some time, have two left-handers. Back to the days of Matthew Hayden and Justin Langer, in fact, and they were a pretty potent pair, weren't they? So it can't be all that bad. Yeah, so that's the team change, I think, to the Australian side. In fact, that may be the only change, because I think as long as the bowlers have got over their soreness, that'll be the Australian side. It'll be almost, as per plan, other than Pekowski being replaced by Harris. Any thoughts with that?
No, I think that I think that the Australian side obviously picks itself. I saw an article. It was ESPN or in the Mail this morning where the guy said, look, the bowlers will be fit and ready to go, but they'll be hoping that Tim Payne wins the toss. They've obviously had a day and a bit in the dirt in Sydney in fairly, hot, hard bowling conditions, hard deck, running in, pounding in. They'll certainly be hopeful that he can win the toss and have a bat and put their feet up for an extra day. I think that the toss, we obviously discussed tosses in Test cricket the other day, but I think the toss tomorrow will be key, just because I think if India can win the toss and have a bat, I think that will potentially take a little bit out of the Australians' legs. I think that another day off with their feet up watching their guys bat would add a bit more potency to it. So Rahane can win that toss. I think that gives India certainly a psychological advantage to start with.
It's funny because, again, in Australia, whenever we win the toss, no matter where we are, even around the world, we always like to bat first. So this time you're saying that Rahane would, if Rahane loses the toss and Australia go about batting as they normally would, it's an advantage, you're saying?
No, I'm saying it's an advantage to Australia to bat first, and Rahane would want to bat first. He'd want to get the Aussie bowlers back out there bowling as soon as possible.
So, again, traditionally, the team that wins the toss and wants to bat first. And there's even more reason for it this time than ever.
Yeah.
So, it's the Gabba. Gabba's known to be a bouncy pitch, and I don't think that's going to change one little bit. It looks like they've prepared a very bouncy pitch as per normal. The only issue is weather. There's discussion. I get asked a lot about weather. In fact, most of our audience want to know about weather. And the reality is that there could be 2 to 2.5 days worth of rain in this match. We're not exactly sure whether it's second or third or fourth, but there looks as though there might be a couple of days worth of rain. But that shouldn't take away from the result, because a test match rarely lasts 5 days, we thought, up until last match. It's very much the case that they normally get it knocked over in 4, despite the fact that India did very well in 5 only as recently as early this week. So, I think the team makeup for Australia is sorted. Pekowski's not playing, and Harris in. The 11's pretty much the same otherwise. In fact, it is the same. But India distinctly have had so many injuries. Bumrah with his abdominal strain. You've got the likes of Fahari with a hamstring, which was hampering him in the game despite batting throughout the last session. Punt, his elbow. He's playing but won't keep, I'm pretty sure. Saha will come in. And that'll leave Agarwal, who injured himself in training, would you believe? And then you've got the bowling attack. We've talked about it already with Bumrah. But Siraj Saini, they've certainly stepped up. They certainly have stepped up. And you've got the likes of this young Shardul Thakur and Natarajan there floating around for the other position. That leaves in India. A lot of the discussion has been around, is it going to be a 7-batter 4 bowler or a 6-batter 5 bowler? And because Jadeja's normally on the side, he makes up that 5th bowling option. But it looks like they're going to have Ashwin, Saini, Siraj, and the new bowler, whether it's Shardul or Natarajan, making 4. Now, what are your thoughts? Should the team go on a definitely a bowler-friendly pitch? Should they go 6-5 or 7-4?
I think that India have to try and look at it, and I'm definitely not a negative when it comes to cricket or sport in general. I like to always try and win or be positive, but I think that if there are going to be a couple of days of rain, then that's going to favour a non-result, say a day and a half's washed out, there's more chance of the draw. I think that India would be delighted with a draw and to walk away still holding the Gavaskar Trophy, and to go back. I think that would be huge. What's their best way of getting a draw or better in the test? It's probably just to pick as much batting as they can. I think that how are the Aussies going to win the test? They're going to win it with their bowling. So how can India, counteract, or it's going to be pick more batters? Would picking an extra seamer benefit them more than picking over a batter? I don't think it would. I think that their best chance is to try and knuckle in bat, and let Australia chase the game from there. And if they can put a big first innings score on the board, then then they can't lose necessarily. So
you're saying 7-4?
I think I'd go with the batting, yeah.
Okay, if that's the case, the batting lineup will probably be, if your way of thinking is right, and I kind of think it will go that way. They'll go with the openers of Sharma and Gill, Pujara, Rahane. That's the top four, with Punt at 5, because they seem to want Punt up the order now, which I agree with. He batted fantastically in the previous test with 97. They may then bring in Prithvi Shaw, because if Agarwal's injured, they'll have to bring in another batter. They haven't got many to choose from. In fact, quite frankly, they've got no one else to choose from. Shaw goes into the side on default, because I think he's one of the last batters left. So, because if Agarwal and Vihari are both out, it has to be Shaw that goes in. So then Shaw would probably go into 6 or 5-6. You'd then have Saha at 7, with Ashwin at 8.
Yeah.
And leaving the 3 bowlers, Saini,
Siraj,
and either Shardul Thakur or Natarajan. Now, I'm not sure what your thoughts are. A left-arm seamer and fast bowler, as opposed to a medium pacer that can bat a bit. Who would you pick?
I think, obviously, I've not seen a lot of those guys play. I'm quite a keen follower of the IPL. Do the fantasy team, and so I'm sure a lot of the guys watching would be pleased with that. So obviously, a lot of what the Australians would have seen of the bowlers would have been through playing against them or in the IPL as well. So it's quite interesting on that front. But I think if you've got a quick left armour, regardless, I think that can make such a huge difference. It's if it was a quick right armour and a medium left armour, I'd be slightly more torn. But I think that the left arm quick, especially at the Gabba, has to be the one, because it can make the difference. And look at Australia over the last 10, 15 years. Stark, Johnson, we've always had someone running in, bowling quick, and left arm seamers are pretty rare and gold dust, really. It's like having a good leggy, isn't it?
So it's a very good point. In fact, the viewers will certainly, there's a lot of people that actually really want Natarajan to be given his debut test this match. So you've got Chris on your side. He's certainly thinking that way. I'm hearing more Shardul, but I don't know. I mean, I tend to think the term X factor is relevant to this match. And if you've got less bowlers, you need an X factor type bowler. They were talking about even Kuldeep with his left arm spin. Apparently he likes bounce. Or a Natarajan, who's a very good Yorker style bowler, left arm, who could be the key as well. So you've got 1 or 2 X factors there that could come to the side. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens tomorrow morning out of those selections. I think most of the viewers actually also think that way. They're particularly intrigued by the team. But India have no choice. They've got to wait till tomorrow morning. They've got to give everybody the opportunity to show their fitness. So they've got a number of walking wounded, namely Vihari, who looks like he's definitely out. Agarwal, who's 50-50, and Bumrah, I think, is virtually not a chance of playing. All right, so that's pretty clear. And the 4th test, we'll probably see. If it's a draw, well, then it's a victory to India. They keep the Border Gavaskar Trophy. And if they lose, well, they lose the trophy. So it looks like a draw is the best result for them, if not a win, of course. And I wouldn't discount that. I think Australia need to be very careful. And the likes of Tim Payne and Steve Smith had a lot of heat on them, more so from the Indian press. The Australian press are certainly supporting them. And it was interesting to hear Vikram, the batting coach, talk about the fact that Rishabh Pant didn't even know there was an issue with this crease marking issue. Didn't even know about it, apparently. So if that is the case, it's quite incredible, because it was such a big deal. And it certainly is silly. There's nothing saying that Smith should have done it. He should have done it. But the reality is it didn't affect Punt's batting at all. So that's interesting.
No.
All right, we're about halfway through our discussion here. And I think it's time. The Australian-Indian series is certainly important, and the 4th test is extremely important. But we might just move a little bit over to talk about the game between Sri Lanka and England, which will also have an eye on England playing India coming up in the future. Tell us your thoughts of today's play, the first day of that test, Chris.
I mean, obviously, I think that the day's nearing its conclusion, and a little bit of a wobble. England coming out to bat, obviously chasing a pretty meagre 135 and 90 for 2 at the moment. And, you know, I've got my thoughts on the side and what it should have been. I think that Ben Foakes should have probably played and kept wicket. I think that you know, there's a lot of talk, you know, in Australia in the series at the moment about the quality of the wicket keepers on both sides. Really, I think that, you know, even the most passionate Indian fan would suggest that Rishabh Pant is a great batter keeper, but his keeping, probably Saha's a better keeper. Would that be might possibly be a fair assessment? Obviously, Pant plays as a batter and he's brilliant, but obviously with the Australians as well, is Tim Payne the best keeper bat you've got? And I think it's the same in England, really. I think in a test series in Sri Lanka, where 75% of the time your keeper's going to be stood up, you have to pick your best keeper. And Ben Foakes, I don't think it's much of a debate. I think it's a fairly general agreement in the country and the media and the pundits that Ben Foakes is the best keeper.
It's interesting you talk about that. I mean, you've just brought up a great point. You look at the 4 sides involved here. Australia have 2 keepers, Payne and Wade.
Yeah.
India have now Saha and Punt. England have 3. They've got Bairstow as well. Who else have you got?
When Ollie Pope plays, he kept wicket in the test in New Zealand. So there's potential that England have 4. Although Pope's not a front line keeper, I mean, he kept wicket in a test match as selected. So,
but then also Sri Lanka have Niroshan Dickwella, they have Pereira, and Mendes. All 3 of those people are keepers as well.
And Chandimal can keep 2. So
can also keep, of course. So you have up to 4 keepers in the Sri Lankan side. That's an incredible situation. I'm trying to work back when that's ever happened before, where you've had literally 4 sides involved here. All 4 have got at least 2 keepers inside, in some cases 3 or 4. That's a remarkable situation, and I'm not a fan of it, to be honest. I don't think it should be the case. It should be a dedicated keeper batsman, and they shouldn't be playing between, like Wade's in a complete state of confusion as far as I'm concerned, whether he's batting middle order, opening the bat 1 minute, possibly keeping as well. There's a lot of, and with Payne also in a bit of a muddle with his form, there's a certain problem that's created by changing keepers to batsmen to keepers in that way. Only Gilchrist did it really effectively. It's something that's, even in England, Butler's a good batter, but he should be the best keeper, shouldn't he?
As I said, I think, and I've looked at it, and I think whichever way you argue, Foakes should be in that side. I think he's the best keeper, and I think he's a better bat, certainly first class wise than Josh Butler. I think Bairstow's stats slightly outshine him in the batting wise, but I think that either way you look at it, I think Foakes is the best keeper and gets the side in the batting front. So combined, it's a no-brainer. I think I see the merits of having 2 keepers, purely because I think that when you go to a place like India next month, Josh Butler, or I think they're having the flexibility, if you go out and field for a day and a half in 45 degrees, the fact that if Bairstow's expected to go out and bat 3, the fact that if Butler's kept for a day allows Bairstow a bit more time to not be so hot, not be so tired, just to concentrate on his batting, if that makes sense. But do you think that the way that keeping has gone, 25, 30 years ago, your keeper often batted 9 or 10 and was just expected to keep. Now he's expected to Rishabh Pant bat 5, Adam Gilchrist to bat 5 or 6, open the batting in one-day cricket. Do you think that it's not as specialist a position anymore as a keeper? Do you think the keeping itself isn't as desired or specialist? It's more you've got to bat, but if you can catch the ball as well, that's brilliant.
I think it's a sad indictment on Test cricket that we have players that aren't top-line keepers in the side on that merit alone. If they can bat, it's a bonus. I think keeping is such an important role. You drop a crucial catch, which even painted in the recent test, he dropped catches off line, and it was quite disturbing. I think keeping a good keeper is worth an equal of a good batsman on the basis of them saving the other team from scoring more runs if they catch the difficult catches. So I think it's a mistake, and it seems to be very common through all 4 sides we've mentioned. I'm sure we could go on with other teams as well.
Mm-hmm.
So concerning. So in the Sri Lankan batting line, they had Thirumanin, they had the likes of Angelo Matthews, they had Dinesh Chandimal, Niroshan Dickwella, all pretty good batters, and with Mendes and Pereira, I think that was one of probably their strongest batting lineup in a long time. They just had a pretty bad day. It sounds by what you described. It. Dom Bess bowled some nice loopy balls, and they just played bad shots. But they were all out for 135, which is disgraceful for Gaul at their home ground, where they normally dominate. It's quite a sad state of affairs, actually.
It's their lowest test score batting first against England at home, I believe. I think I heard that on the test match special.
That doesn't surprise me.
I think a big kick for them would have been Karatna, and I apologise for the pronunciation, Karatna Irani, who's their captain. I believe he broke a finger in training or this week and was ruled out. A hairline fracture, I think I heard. He's ruled out, and he's been a fairly steady opening bat for them over the years, hasn't he? So that's a big miss. Pereira opened the batting. Kaushal Pereira, very aggressive, very positive. I think second ball, Dom Bess bowled, he reverse swept and got caught slip. And you think you've got 5 days to bat, and in Sri Lanka, it's all about first innings runs. If you're getting bowled out for 100 in Sri Lanka, even if England get bowled out for 250, chances of you winning that test are pretty low. Like, they would never have seen Dom Bess, never played against Dom Bess. And I think that's potentially an advantage that England might have going to India, is that Jack Leach and Dom Bess are fairly unknown, then very orthodox, but the Kohlis and the Rahanes and the Pujaras might not have played a lot against them. So at least that's potentially something that might get slight advantage to start with. But you just
they're going to be watching. They're going to be watching this Test series. I'm sure they're up right now. Some of them watching that match as we speak and taking little notes. And Kohli would have plenty of time. He's got a young baby now, of course, but he'll have plenty of time to watch. Don't worry, India will be ready for England, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it was interesting reading the comments on after our video the other day, and I can't believe how many views, over 15,000 views and 300 comments. Fantastic. It blown me away, really. But a lot of the Indian faithful and Indian fans were coming on saying that India will still win. I think that my point was misconstrued slightly. I wasn't for a second saying that England would go and beat India or would be favourites. My point the other day was that I think England are in a position where they can go with more confidence to India about getting a result, and I think that they will. I think that there's more chance of them getting a positive result than years gone by, but we'll see. I think it large comes down to the batting. We've got a very young, sort of inexperienced top order, with Zach Crawley, Burns, Sibley. And it's just, if they can knuckle in and score some first innings runs, and there's every chance. And same in Sri Lanka. I think that if you're going to have a warm up to an India series, then going to Sri Lanka for 2 tests is probably as good as it gets, really. I think that will certainly hold them in good stead.
Well, I just noticed Joe Root's not out 50 at the moment too, so he's been in form for some time. He's looking very good. He's a bit like the Kane Williamson of New Zealand, isn't he, in terms of comparisons?
Yeah, I think there's the big 4 or 5 in the world at the moment, isn't there? And I think that especially the Australians would say that Root doesn't quite get into that category. You've got Williamson, Kohli, Smith, and Root are sort of the big 4 or 5 at the moment. And I think the only frustration from Root would be his lack of conversions. He scores a lot of 50s.
He scored a lot of runs. He scored a lot of test runs.
It's nearly 8,000 test runs. I think it is something like that. Could be wrong. But he scores. If you look at his stats, he scores a lot of 50s and doesn't convert them to hundreds. If you look at Kohli's or Williamson's, they convert a lot more. And I think that's the benchmark of a great test match batter, is the ability to score big hundreds.
Well, you've got Kane Williamson currently first on the list, followed by Steve Smith. I think Kohli must be either third or thereabouts, and I'm sure the Root's somewhere up there as well. Labuschagne's up there in there, but I'm not as convinced on him as some other people are. And obviously you've got the likes of Warner, who hasn't done well since his injury. He's had a pretty ordinary match, and he's hopefully a bit fitter this time for the Test match. He's going to need to be, because he's lost Bukowski and he's got Marcus Harris with him. Hasn't got as much depth there as they probably normally would like to have. And I'm still not convinced about Matthew Wade playing in a position in the batting order. He's all over the joint in terms of batting form. Shouldn't open. And is he a middle order batsman? I'm not sure. Travis says not doing well. Australia's got very low stocks. They're not playing Sheffield Shield. In India, of course, Ranji Trophy is a very important selection as well. There's no Sheffield Shield here in Australia, like your county season, and they've got nothing to go by. None of the players can show form, other than luckily Harris and Bukowski early in the season, where they're both getting double centuries. In one match, they both got 250 odd. Quite incredible. All right. So, do you think England's going to win this match? They look like they're in a good position.
They're 30 behind, as I said, 100 for 2 now. If we can get, barring a first innings collapse, I think we'll win by an innings. If we can get 300 on the board, Sri Lanka might make us bat again. But I don't think that. I think that Sri Lanka are still. They've obviously had some injuries as well coming out of the South Africa series. They've had their captain opening bat injured. A couple of their bowlers obviously were injured in the South Africa series, but I think England are too strong, even in Sri Lankan conditions, to challenge them.
I'm wary of Angelo Matthews being in the side. He's a very stubborn customer and could come good in the second innings. You just don't know, because their batting lineup on paper is still very strong, even though they've collapsed with the first innings quite terribly. I'm not writing it off that quickly, but it does look like England will win them for sure. So this has been a very good conversation, Chris. I think we can look at what we're going to do more is we're going to try and get, as we've discussed, we're an Aussie and upon talking with and about India. We need more Indian response. So we need our audience out there, and we're talking to you directly now. We want you to give us questions, give us topics, either by way of our Twitter accounts, for both Chris and I, which we'll talk. Mine is at Norm Koch, NORMKOCH, and Chris, yours is
Vern158. Maybe in the comments when you upload the video, we can leave them in the comments. As I said, feel free to add and ask questions. And I think I said to Norm the other day that maybe the last 5 or even 10 minutes, depending on how many questions there are, we can chat about any questions that people ask in and see what their thoughts are, and we can discuss it and go from there.
Absolutely. Again, either in the comments in the YouTube page on Eyes on Cricket with Norman Kochnick, or our Twitter accounts. It won't matter where, but please feel free to ask us questions. I know there are plenty out there. I know one of the major questions I've been asked is about the selections of the Indian side, which we've talked about today. Also about weather. Weather in Queensland, as in the Gabba, is extremely unpredictable. It's virtually a tropical area of Australia, as we would all know, and it's subjected to storms at the drop of a hat, especially in this period of January and February. So we're expecting up to 2.5 days worth of rain, but it can rain very hard and then an hour later be as dry as anything. So the ground's incredibly good at soaking up that water and running off. So we can still have a lot of play here. And I think even 3 days might be enough to knock a team over if the bowling suits. All right, so please, again, view, like, and share what you've got in front of you here, what we're going to talk to you about. Again, questions, both comments and feedback, provide us, and we'll answer them for you over time. And clearly subscribe as well if you're not subscribing already. It's great to be able to be a part of this growing network that I've been able to be fortunate enough involved with. And thanks to Chris, we've got an English component there as well. We want an Indian component. We want a Sri Lankan component. We want the world to be a part of this. It's a great platform to talk about cricket in a truly unbiased and supportive manner and show the best, even though I don't exactly like England that much. Could be
slightly biased. There is a slight bias here. England are still going to win the Ashes, and England are going to win in India, hopefully. So there's still a little bit of a bias, but only on a friendly level.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll sign off now, but stay tuned for an Aussie upon talking about with India. Very important series. We're going to interact with you both in this last Test match and into the England series as well. So this is Norman Koch and Chris Vernon on an Aussie upon talking about with India.